So
Don't know how to do that. Just watch David. David, go.
it is important to note that it is complicated at first. It's a lot easier than it used to be, but flows are like coding without having to write code. Because once you understand variables and like loops and all these different things, you're doing complex coding work just without actually writing the code. So flow is just kind of the interface, GUI, however you want to call it, that you can drag elements and variables and do things that are not code in how you're doing it, but in the back end, Salesforce is doing code work. So things like queries, you can do that. You can update records. So it's a lot more powerful than just like workflow rules. Who's used Process Builder? Everybody, right? Lane, maybe not.
Is the word I tried.
Used is good.
Yeah, used or
tried it
successful.
once.
Trailheads.
Process Builder.
Used or successful.
It's going to be interesting to see where this is over the next year because Flow is getting like the most focused by Salesforce. They had something that we actually have in 100-fold.org called Flow Triggers, which used to be the old school, use a workflow rule to trigger a flow. And then Process Builder came into the mix. And that is typically how people will launch flows now, or through like a button or through URL, or put it on like a page in a Lightning page. So you've got all those different places where you could put a flow into. And now I haven't got a ton of information on it, but there's going to be kind of like you can launch flows from flows, so you don't have to have Process Builder anymore.
Can you explain what's the difference, or when would you use Process Builder?
Yeah. So we've got two things here. We've got screen flow and auto launched flow. So the real kind of difference between screen flow and auto launched flow is how does it start? So auto launched flows are the only ones that can be triggered by like a Process Builder because they don't have any screens, which means they don't have to be interacted with. So that means Process Builders can typically be, when you're using Process Builder, there's more than one way to kick things off. You can go code or platform events, all that sort of stuff. But the majority of the time, it's when a record is edited or created.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when a Process Builder fires. So that's when you normally would have an auto launched flow go. You can use like auto launched flows from other flows, like you can get kind of crazy like that. But in general, an auto launched flow is when a record's edited or created and you want something to happen. So with that in mind, I've got a Service Cloud org that we'll kind of walk through, and there is a series of auto launched flows that we'll see, as well as screen flows. And screen flows are ones where you need to have some sort of interaction with your users. That interaction can be, I need these fields filled out, or that interaction could be, I just need them to click a button to know that's when we want things to happen. And we'll have a few different things that you can see in the demo of how you can utilize a flow that way. But with the screen flow, it's important to know typically your limits, everyone familiar with some limits of like Apex and SOCL limits of like you can't have too many with doing data loads. Yeah. So there's a lot more chance to hit limits with an auto launched flow typically than a screen flow, because if you're going to do a lot of processing that might hit a limit, with a screen flow you can put like a break in it and then have the person click a button again and trigger it. So you can kind of break it up into multiple clicks instead of having Salesforce break. So let's just jump into a screen flow. That's going to be, now one thing to note, when you do hit this, just because you hit screen flow doesn't mean that you have to put a screen. It just means that it will include screen-like elements on your builder. So you'll notice if I go back to flows and I hit new flow here, and I go to auto launched,
Same thing.
we have less actions over on the left here. So what was that? So you'll see the main thing is whether or not the screen is there. So Salesforce is just trying to say, you said you want to do it this way. we're going to help you not build something that you didn't intend. But it doesn't really matter. I typically just, if I know what I'm doing, I might put auto launched in, but otherwise, I almost always just go with the screen. And then if I need a screen, I've got it. So as you're working with the flow, it's pretty, zoom in to it better. It's got a few things going on here, and it's pretty easy to use once you kind of get comfortable. So up in the top, we have an undo or a redo, and then we have a copy and paste. So if you select element or elements, and then you hit this, it will duplicate the elements. So if you have some pretty like things that you're doing a lot and you just need to tweak one or two things, you can use duplicate and then view properties over there. And then up in the top right, we've got, once I do things, you've got your run, debug, activate, save as, and save. So the one thing that came out like a year ago or so is debug, which I will show y'all. And that is like the nicest thing ever. It tells you everything that's going through your flow, so you know like all the inputs and what's happening, and it just helps you troubleshoot it a lot better. Because back in the day, when I started learning flow, like the input output variables and things that you wanted to pass into your flow, like there was no debugger, so you were just like, what's wrong? And you were kind of out of luck. So some things to note when we go to the manager here. This is going to be all of your variables or inputs or screen elements. You'll be able to see everything that you add onto your flow. So if I know what I'm doing, I'll sometimes go ahead and pre-build my resources, but you don't have to. But if we're going to have this come from like a record, and we know it's going to be like, if it's on a page or if it's on an action or something, the Salesforce, like if you're passing in a record ID, is the lowercase r, capital ID, and make it text and available for input. So what's going on there?
Can you zoom that?
Yes. All right. So, getting motion sick.
I said and description.
Everything called record ID?
No, just, so what's gonna happen is
This is
if
like
you're
your-
using like an action, so like a button,
Yeah.
if you wanna put a flow in a button, Salesforce doesn't let you select where you wanna pass the ID into, and it automatically passes it into a variable called record ID. So if you don't have a variable called record ID, you don't know what ID of the record you're actually on. So I just put record ID, even if I know I'm coming from a case every time, and it's gonna be a process builder that's passing it in, I'll still put record ID just to have some consistency. But you don't have to unless you're gonna do a action button that you wanna have a flow launch from. You can do default values if you want, but rarely do that until you start getting into more complex stuff. And then allow multiple variables collection. Generally, unless you know what you're doing with loops, you're not going to use that one because that one gets you into loops.
Did you say the default value gets you into loops?
The allow multiple values or collection. You'll notice that once you do that, you can't actually have a default value. But so once
Okay, and so a very random question here, but by marking it available for input, that means that that variable is available for access in another step of the flow, right?
yeah, kind
This
of.
always throws me off.
So you've got, this is like your Salesforce. This whole big bucket here. Let's see if this one's better. All right, so now we've got like our flow. So the flow, like you're doing things all over here and you want to launch your flow. So your inputs would be anything that you want to pass from outside your flow into your flow. And then your outputs would be any variable that you want to pass out of your flow. Now, the majority of the time, you're not going to probably have an output variable unless you're making your flow be part of something like a flow inside of the flow or a flow that's connected to Apex or something. So you're mostly going to use inputs, and it's easy, like as you start to like create a process builder, to be like, oh, well, I don't have, how does it know what record I'm on? And then you realize I need an input. So in general, it'll kind of be obvious of like, where's my variables coming from? And you'll see that. But 90% of the time, I only have one input variable, and it's the record ID. And then from there, I do some other stuff. So we've got a record ID variable. So we know what record we're coming from, and we'll do that in the setup here. Now we want to do a get record. So we'll pick, let's say, the case. So I'll call this get case. And then you select your object. So you just type in here, search, and then find the case object. It's hard to zoom. And then I say search for a case with the ID that equals the record ID that we just had. So now I'm going through, so this is a query, like in Salesforce terms, like think about running your report. So all I'm doing here is I'm saying, give me a case that has this ID. So with Salesforce IDs, they're unique. So that means we're going to return one record.
So I missed it at the very top. You picked choice.
I just said it's a new get record. So just the get records element.
Oh.
So what we're doing here is we're just finding, I'm just finding all the information of the record that I then want to work with. So what we're saying is the object, and then we filter to get the record that we want to work on. And you don't have to use the ID field. That's what I want to use. But you could use a combination of different values to get that. So you can get creative with it. But in this scenario, we know we're going to come from a case, and I want to pass that case ID in. So we get the record ID. And then now it will automatically store the variables into an SObject variable for you. And what an SObject variable is just a record variable. So it's like you've got the whole case record available to you. I like to check this box of manually assign variables at the bottom. And then if you hit that, you hit new resource, and you want to create a variable with the record type. I like to just call it case, because otherwise that lookup, the name of like your get records element, is going to be the name of your object. And I don't like that when I work with it. So you type in API name case, data type is record.
Wait, what was my resource type?
Variable.
Okay.
And then API name is, we're just going to call it case, data type record. If we were doing multiple records, like we wanted to get multiple and loop through them and go crazy, you could check that, but we don't need that right now. And then for the object, we go look for our case. And then we don't, this is not going to have anything to do with input or output, so we can just leave those unchecked. And then we hit done. So now at the bottom here, it's going to take the information from the record we find and store it in this case record variable. So in here, we can now select values that we would want to update. So we might want to update status. We might want to update the description or subject, or you don't necessarily have to update them, but if you want to reference them, you need to select them in here. Otherwise, you'll get a float error.
Scary thing.
They're somewhat scary. Grab case type.
You're putting those into
The variable. So it's like
the variables in the new resource that you made?
Yeah. So if we don't say the fields here, we can't reference them in our flow.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
So we did that, and now we've got our get records to the case. So we'll just drag our start element right there.
I'm trying to do what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and I missed one of those fields. Is that what you're wrong?
Nope.
Okay.
But if you get an error, then you know you can go back and add them.
Okay.
All right, so we've got our case. So now I know what we can, like now we have a case record that we can do things to. So what we're gonna do is grab a screen element.
Wait, how did you draw that error? Oh, sorry.
Oh, on the start, just the little dot,
Oh, yeah.
and then drag it to the get
I
records.
should know that. I should watch that one.
All right, so we have a screen element. We just dragged it over from our elements manager. And now we can put a label, called this update key fields. And we're just going to use the subject and description. I think I put both of those in there. So if I hit text, you just click on it once and the text field will come in here. I'm going to call it subject. And then if you go to the default value and you type in case, you'll see where it says record single variable. And then you type in subject, and now that will default with the case's subject value.
How do you edit it? I'm back on trying to write subject.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
You good? Okay, see.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so now let's hit the long text area over on the left here. I'll try to zoom in a little more. Okay, so we're going to call this description. And then we're going to go case, record single variable, description. All right, so now.
You give an icon.
Oh, I didn't catch where we were at the get, so now I'm so far behind, I'm just watching, but I'm
How did you
watching.
get to the case direct description thing? I did type that one in. So.
Did you put the long description, a long,
Yeah, you got
text
long
area?
there, so you
Yeah.
put description.
you just call it description. And you could call this like whatever you want because we're going to deal.
No, that case description thing. That you
Oh, if you go to insert resource,
Mhm.
and then you can type in case.
And then
And then once you type in case, you type in description. And you can select it there.
Oh, of course.
All right, so we've got that.
you got it.
Now let's grab our get records where we say get case and drag that over to the update screen. So because we're using a record variable instead of static variables, which is the best practice way of doing it, we're gonna have to do one extra step, but it
Record
makes
values are the best case or static?
best practice, yeah, record variable.
Okay.
Record variables are because they organize everything a lot nicer and they're more scalable to do. So we're gonna drag the first orange one called assignment out onto the page. And then what we're gonna do is we're just gonna call this set case values. Because what we're gonna do is set the values in this assignment to a record variable based off of the screen. So we're saying, so we've got the subject, which is our input here, description, which is our long text input. And we're gonna wanna put that into the,
Okay, so our screen is asking for a subject and a description, and now we're gonna insert it into something? Is that what you said?
so these are the, like,
Yeah, those are on the screen. Those are for a person to input.
yes, so these inputs, we wanna take, if somebody updated something, we wanna now update the case value.
That's
So
entry.
that, yes. So we're gonna take the variables here. We're gonna look for case, and we'll type in subject and grab our case subject. And then we go down to our screen components. I could just type subject in here, but you'll see it says screen component. So that's our input that's on the screen itself. So whatever value is on the screen,
Click on the word screen.
oh, you gotta type in subject.
Okay, so subject and then look up screen.
Well, when I typed in subject, then screen components came up.
Yep.
Because if I type in description, it'll do the same thing.
Yep. All right, and so we'll do the same thing for description. So now you should have description, case description equals description, case subject equals subject. You good?
Mm-hmm. I can hear words, it's comprehending it.
It just takes practice.
No, I did the wrong thing. There we go. I mean, I get it, it's just, it's a lot of details, it's a lot of steps, and if you don't use it very often,
It takes, yeah.
Uh-huh.
I feel like I need to go create something now.
We can give you a project.
And I know.
We'll get that out loud.
But the thing is, at my house, my internet, anyway.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm so with you. I have to hide at the office late at night because,
Yes. Okay, what else? Anything on that one?
Nope. So once you have those two, hit done, and then we're going to grab our screen element circle and drag it to the assignment one and connect the dots. You good?
Mm-hmm. I'm with you on one of my lines straight now.
It's important to me.
He'll sit there and like.
I do the same thing.
But now that I have him like that, I'm like, oh yeah, I want him straight.
When I get into other
All
parts
right.
and I see it all over the place, I'm like,
So we're gonna grab the update records element, and we're just gonna call it update case. And then we will go click on here, and the very nice thing is you'll see case is like the only option because we've got, it only lets me show the record single variables. So it doesn't give me like other things. So it's a little bit easier to make sure you're on the right track. All right, and that's all we have to do. And now it will update our case after we drag the line from assignment to updated records. Everyone there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we're done with this flow. And let's hit save.
How did you just move them all down?
So I just moved by grabbing a screen, you can kind of move that around.
Thanks, okay.
believe me, there's people where you have to pull the whole screen over, they've gone like,
I do prefer, like a flow that looks like this. Like go that way as opposed to or something. It's just a lot harder to like understand if you get one that's just like a big box as opposed to something that goes like timeline. So, and believe me, they get nice and long. All right, so we're gonna say update key fields. Now, ideally, we're doing like a naming convention. This would be like case update key fields or something that we know what we're doing. But since this is just practice, we'll not focus on naming convention. So we'll hit save. And then after you hit save, up in the top, hit that activate button if you're ready to use it. So let's go into debugger. So after you activate, just hit debug. And does everyone have a case record in their org they can go look at? Are you in a test org or a real org? Lane's in a real org.
I'm in a test org.
Okay, so I'm gonna go to my debugger. I'm gonna go to a case. So I've got this case right here. And I'm gonna pass, when you are in a debugger, you can pass your input variable in. So if I hit run, you'll notice over here on the right, I get to see everything that my flow is doing. So the flow started, it tells me this is my variable I passed in. The fast lookup happened, and that's everything that's happened to this point. So now we're on the next element, which is the screen. And if you notice, design issue with mechanical rotor, no description. If I go to this, we look at my details, subject, design issue with mechanical rotor, description, nothing. So inside my debugger, if I want to go and update the information, I hit next. It says all done. So that means it's finished everything, no problems. And then over on the right here, we can see what the initial was. So the value at runtime, which is what we filled out. And then we can see after that, we just set the variables. So case subject equals subject, case description equals description, and it tells us what that means. So we said the flow is fun, subjects equal the same thing. And then we update the case. So in here, we can see things like this is the ID, status, description, origin, type. Those are all the fields I added in. So it's taking all those and updating the case with that value. But the only thing that really changed was the description because we did not change any of the other values. So now if I go refresh my page here, that actually happened. And you will see that the description is updated.
All right.
So you're able to kind of create like little miniature easy buttons by taking like a flow, putting whatever kind of logic you want into it. And you can do a lot more like crazy backend things if you wanted to go like run other queries to find related records or something. This is very just straightforward of just how the flow can be used. But
So how about I give you some scenarios and would it be a flow, would it be a workflow, would it be
yeah,
process
can we
builder?
put this, so let's put this button on the page. So if we go to case,
Like that, I just want to, like, it's really kind of going through,
like what's the right?
what's your
tool for
best
the job?
process? Like, this is what I've been kind of learning is really think through, okay, you want a checkbox that happens on an account page to check something on the affiliated contacts from that contact page. You know, what would you use for that? If you just want to say, if the first letter of a word in the name value is not capitalized, then make it an error. You know, it's like those things are, so you're going, okay, well, that would be a validation. This is a scenario you would need a flow for. This is a scenario that a process builder would be best for. Or this is the best one for a workflow with a field update. I mean, not a workflow, yeah, a workflow with a field update.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, I'm sorry.
I don't like all the options.
You just did all that without.
Yeah, sorry, I'll go. All right, so go to buttons, links, and actions, and then you will hit the button.
So you're in
on the top
cases, right?
Yes, under the object you want to put it on, and then you will hit in the top right, new action. And then once you hit new action, you will select the action type of flow, and then you will pick the flow that you want it to be. So update key fields was our flow here. And then you put your label, and then you hit save. So if you notice, it's not asking me whatever you want. I just called it update.
Yeah, I was trying to use the thing about.
But if you notice the record ID, that's not anywhere for you to like put in. So you have to know, and Salesforce doesn't say anything here.
So you just went to cases, to buttons, links, and actions and found that flow.
After you create a new, you create a new
New
action. And so when you hit new action, you have action type here.
Look, so when you choose flow, it actually lets you see what flows you have created.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are all your screen flows that will show up. So once you add that, then you can update your case, and you'll see now if I hit the update key fields on my screen here, that we've got the flow working.
Did you have to put it on the page or anything? Or it's just
Once you add it to the layout, yes.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I did that really quick.
I was looking here. Not you.
So then when I hit next on that and go, it will update the case and like refresh the page because the record's updated. All right, so if I hit next here, you'll see that the subject has been updated.
So in a nutshell, you just made an action to go on the object that you just made the flow for. So then it would kick off for all flows and not obviously just your test flow that you just did by taking the.
It will work on any case, and it allows me to have like a streamlined set of fields. Now, this scenario could be solved like 3 or 4 other ways, but just from like a put it on the page, how to get case information and update the case. Just kept it pretty simple there. But yeah, so that is like a really straightforward screen flow, how you can drop it. There's a few other things that you can do. So,
and then you can drag it down. Mhm.
all right, so we're gonna just show one other common way of using flow. So if I go on my page to edit page, we already have a flow in here, but we'll add the flow we just built. So I'm going to drag this flow, if I can click. And as you can see over here, we've got our flow that we're selecting, and I can do just like with the button, I can go update key fields. And then you've got the option to make it 1 or 2 columns if you've got a lot of fields. We'll use 2 columns just to show you what that looks like. And then here's passing in, you'll see, because this is an input variable, my record page can now pass that in, and you'll see the record ID. So they're doing that. Now we can add visibility that's conditional, which you can do for like all things. And I've got that over here on this flow that's below. So it displays when this is a formula field that checks to see if you're the owner of the case, and the record status is new. So if you're not the owner and the record's new, that claim button that you saw shows up.
Question, if you have a very specific record type that utilizes the flow, is it a best practice to just have a very specific lightning page then that goes with that record type?
I would generally put it conditional if it's everything else is the same.
Okay.
Because it's one less thing you have to deal with.
Right. And you don't have 4 of everything?
Yep.
Okay.
So you can see like 2 columns doesn't really look too pretty. So I typically don't use it, but it's an option.
Can you zoom on that?
Yeah.
It's just the subject description, yeah.
So it's our flow that we had that was in the action, but we just put it as the flow on the screen, and it knows what we're doing.
What have you found from user the screen flow actually showing that way as a component versus a button? I mean, we are just about to go live.
Something that's used conditionally will typically be something on the screen, unless it's, no, in general conditionally.
Okay.
Because like this claim one, this is so with flows, what's made them even more complex and like also powerful is you can put lightning components, which is like custom code of Salesforce, inside of flow. So this is like this claim is actually an image that I uploaded. That it's and I'll jump into the flow real quick. It's claim case here. This is kind of like another example, but this screen, all it is an image button. And this image button I downloaded from somebody who had a package. It's unofficial SF, and they have lots of flow components that you can install.
But you can put any image there, really?
You can put any image in, yeah. So
The case
Picture of a
again.
cow. I mean,
yeah, you can put a picture of a cow.
I keep threatening people, GIFs are going to show up in our board
You can
somewhere.
put a GIF. So all it is right here is a static resource. So you put the static resource name there, and then it will put it in there. And then the other field that you have to fill out is the dest flow transition. And we're saying when I click this image, I want it to be like the next button was clicked. So that's all we
That
have
sounds
to
like ask
do.
you is what happens.
It
when you
looks
click.
really like it looks really complex with all the inputs, and the help doc of the particular component will let you know what you need to use. But after that happens, I set the owner ID to the running user, and then we do the same thing of update the case. And if there's any issues, I send them to a fault screen, which is where that flow error message will be shown. so they can hopefully see why. So that's what this does. And if I hit claim, it takes owner, makes me the owner. Let me see. All updates here, you'll see just now we changed the owner of the case from Cloudy to Rhino. And no longer is that claim button on the page because we conditionally put the flow there with the formulas that we had. So it was the formula that's checked if you were the running user, and then also what the status was.
Because it wouldn't make sense to claim something you already own.
Exactly. And like, let's say we move it to the status of working, and then we could change the owner to Cloudy again. You'll notice that the flows still stay sitting because it's not in the right status. So you can conditionally put flows that only meet certain criteria and have them pop up on your page. And then
So you have claim being new and isn't assigned to anybody.
isn't
Or
assigned
doesn't
to
have an
you.
owner. Or it's not assigned to me.
So if Kermit owned it and it's in the new status and I went to that case, I would see the button.
Oh, so you could still,
If he's not working on it, but maybe it got assigned to him. Yep. So another like scenario that this gets like used in a lot would be like sales cloud, people with like, let's say donations or opportunities that are greater than like $10,000. Maybe you want like a special screen with like additional inputs that you request for just those types of deals or donations. That's like just any sort of thing where you want like this extra thing to pop up that needs to like be more complex. But that is kind of like the basics of ScreenFlow, and hopefully that made some sense. The other thing that you can do with flows is the process builder triggering a flow to have it do all sorts of fun stuff. So this one will be just more of a show and tell. So I'm going to go turn my process builder off real quick. That's firing a flow that's doing some logic. So we'll deactivate it. So now if I go and create a case, all right, so we've created our case. You'll notice I'm the owner because I just created it, so no claim, but we still have that update key field on there. Now, we have SLAs and entitlements that our service people are supposed to use. And if you notice, we've got the milestone here. So like I'm supposed to have my resolution done a month ago. Okay, so we're done. But we've got those sorts of things that we want to have happen. So milestones, like you've got to go have an entitlement record, which is like an object record tied to your case. So you can't do that like with workflow rule. You can kind of do it with process builder if you're going to give everybody the same one. But with flow, we're able to automatically like either create an entitlement if we don't have one, or go find the existing one. So like if I do this through the UI, you'll see that, do we not have it on the page layout? Let's go update the page layout real quick so you can see the entitlement. It's like
the record, just the case.
It's a record that says like this is, so entitlements and milestones in Salesforce let you say, these are like what we expect people to do. So like first response, how quickly are your service people responding when a case comes in? Maybe you say like they need to have responded within 30 minutes. So then it starts the timer once it's associated to see whether or not your service people are hitting that. And you can have it.
Workflow rules with that though.
Correct. You would use like process builder. So with that in mind, like you can have entitlements that are standard, like what we're doing here, which is just one entitlement for everybody, but they're built to where you can have it be like product specific. So in the Salesforce world, let's say like Salesforce support has like an hour response time for Service Cloud and a 4-hour response time for Sales Cloud and an 8-hour response time for dev work or something like. So based off of what people are calling about, they might have a different like response time that they're being tracked towards, if that makes sense. So entitlements let you set up the milestones that are tied to that of like all the different things you need to do. So you'll see we've got our standard entitlement here. If I click on that record, we can see what it's got. So like whether it's active or not, does it have a start and end date? You don't need an end date if it's just going to be ongoing, but maybe you want to give somebody like premier status for a year because they just bought your premier status product. So that gives them like faster SLAs than maybe the people not on premier. So that's like how entitlements can be used. And then like the related, you can see all the cases that have this entitlement tied to it. So it's just a way for you to like put milestones and track things that people are doing. And as you can see, because it's a record, it's not just like a pick list or just like, we're not tracking it like on a field. This is a lot harder for us to like automate, and we want it to like not be something that service people automatically or like have to like fill out themselves. We want it just to happen.
As they do their jobs, it gets updated.
Yep. So what we've got here is a process builder, and at the very beginning, we say needs entitlement. If it doesn't have one, our logic here is has an account and doesn't have an entitlement. So we're using the formula fields that kind of look like, or the formula evaluates to true, which is kind of like a formula field in Salesforce. So if the account ID is filled out, but not is blank, and if the entitlement ID is not filled out, then we want to go add our entitlement, and that we pass over. So a little different from the last one, but we're passing over the case ID and the account ID, which we've got different variables than what we use, but it's just shows that you can kind of do whatever you need to. So as we go into our entitlement automation flow, so this is what the process builder would kick off, and this is our logic. Sorry, this one looks ugly. Don't judge me. All right, so the first thing we do here is we determine, does this, sorry, it's really bothering.
Well, I kind of get it. I do the same way.
All right.
That makes more sense.
Okay, so the first thing we do is find the account's entitlement. There we go. So we look for the account, and we grab the account and find their entitlement ID. So we know we have an account because we got that from the process builder, and then we go and grab the entitlement that's tied to that account. Now, then we've got a decision that says, did we find an entitlement? If entitlement ID is null equals false, which means there was a value, then we go down the yes outcome. Otherwise, if it is null equals true, we go down the no outcome. So if we have a no, that's why it was like that. If we have a no, then we need to go find the SLA process, which is that entitlement that's active. And then we want to create an entitlement that's a part of that account. And now you'll see here, we're using the static variables instead of a record variable, just to save an element. But we set the account ID, the name, SLA process, and start date to the current date. So we're creating that record that you saw right here. So like if I delete this, oh, it's got 3 tied to it, so it won't let me. Let's delete these. All right, so now there's no entitlement tied to United Oil and Gas Corp. So it's going to go down this path. It's going to fill up these fields because we've determined these are the ones that are required and the values we need to automatically be set up every time if like one doesn't exist. Ideally, once they're a customer, they've got this record. This is just like if a new customer comes in, then we need to make sure they have one. But if they're an existing one, then it would just go to grabbing that existing entitlement ID and then finding the case. So we say when ID equals case ID, and then updating the entitlement ID on the case with that entitlement.
Why is the arrow that direction?
Because you're taking, this is an update, so you're taking this value and updating this on the case.
Got it.
All right, so that's what we're doing in the flow. And then our process builder is triggering that. So if we go and reactivate this process builder, and then now we go create a case here. And we hit save. You'll see our milestones. So we've got first response, 30 minutes to get that first response, and we've got 24 hours to get resolution.
Oh.
So those are part of our entitlement. So if I go back to the United Oil, I hit, refresh the tab. This entitlement should show up once the internet catches up. I'll just click on entitlements, so that will go quicker. And you'll see this entitlement that we just created at 5:40 Pacific time with those values that we put in here. So that was created before, and then once that got created, it automatically added the milestones because that's how the entitlement milestones works with Salesforce. Those get auto-created. So our flow determined we needed to create this, it created it, and then updated the case. And all that happened from the process builder. So that would be an example of what kind of flow?
Oh, that's enough.
Yes.
Automated.
Auto launch.
Or auto. I'm like automated.
So, but yeah, so that's like one example of how you can use flow to create records for you. You do lookups to find out, like, do I need to create this, even though it's like the case has an account, and then you go to the account, and then you go check if it has an entitlement, and that's like what you're looking for. So you can check like multiple levels away, and then determine whether or not you need to do more things, and then go update the case or do whatever you need to do.
Cool.
All right, so that, I stopped sharing. All right, let's see. I think those were kind of the main things. I've got some like other things we can go into, but like here's a loop. But we don't need to necessarily get into this right now. Did you have some questions?
Well, that one that you had that had the dotted lines on it.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you how you, I mean, so far I've only seen to drag a solid line. I don't know how you did that dotted line.
Yeah, so let's jump into that. Okay, so a fault generally only happens around a record lookup or get records, or record update, or a record delete. Am I missing one? And a create. Yeah, so those are the four, like these four data ones potentially could have a problem, because like you go to create a new record, maybe you missed a required field or a validation rule triggered, or you go to update it, maybe you missed a validation rule, or you went to delete it and maybe there's something stopping you from deleting it, or you went to look it up and then you found out like maybe you didn't have access to look that record up or something. So there's a few reasons that like you could not have it. They're a little harder to see here, but so we've got like after you've moved this one to like the screen, you'll notice the screen's also been set to the assignment, but you still have a dot. So if it's a pink one, which is a data element, you can then move the fault here.
Oh.
So then if we have any sort of problems, there's a variable in our screen that's called flow. And it's global variables that like you're kind of maybe used to seeing in the formula field. And it doesn't like it when you click it on it that way though. Which is like the current date time, when you started the interview, that sort of thing is being tracked here. But the fault message is that error message. So I can grab that, and you can do all sorts of fun stuff with it.
Exactly.
Here, I'm going to pause the screen for a
Aren't
second.
you the one that said you put error messages in that says, this is why we can't have nice stuff? I threatened my staff with that. I'm like, I don't know how to do it, but I threatened them.
That's
with
what
it.
I'm pausing the Zoom for a second to show that. This is my company's org.
I was just like, do we have to close our eyes?
Now you're good.
Ah! We're gonna do that
We
here.
got a few things right here.
Holy what?
Can you imagine a Salesforce consulting company, like creating their?
Oh my
own
gosh.
org?
Yeah.
It's one of those things where,
You talking about 100 miles.
so
What?
this is a little bit more complex. This is our pricing flow, and there's a lot going on
That's
here.
just to say, we can't have nice things. I close it just for that.
So what's happening here is our salespeople really don't want to fill out products. So there's a multi-select, and in that multi-select, I'm parsing the values because they're semicolon, and then I'm creating a product for each of those values. And I have to also like figure out the quantity to associate it based off of the number of hours, because we sell hours as well as rate. So like rate times hours,
Mhm.
and then we kind of base it off of products, but not really. So that's what's going on here, and there's like subflows, and yeah, it gets fun. But where is my flow here? I think it's okay. So at the very bottom, you can see I'm a little snarky.
Why?
I just call Y. I throw all the if there's any error. So ideally, if you're being good, you would have like more fault messages that you would know, like at this part of the flow, if it errors, it's most likely this thing, so I can give them like a different response. But here I was just like, well, they should be better than this. And then, like I just say, this is why we can't have nice things and put in a fault message. So
Has anyone commented on that?
no, but it happened. Somebody hit it today. And the reason they hit it, I wonder if I can get to an opportunity real quick.
The best.
I'm just gonna turn my screen off for 1 second before I go through
We
all
start
that.
looking at your opportunities.
Yeah, I don't know what's gonna show up. I don't really look at them.
I did a couple goal actions and I tried to be encouraging. So like new contact, and it was like, great job with a smiley face.
All right.
Like, I'll be nice before I start getting.
They do have where they could like throw confetti. Like when they.
I know, I haven't figured it out.
Yeah. they
All right.
throw confetti.
So this is
Congrats on
the
that.
flow, and it has a different thing if there's products like not added yet. But this one will be like, here's the current amount of your opportunity. Here's your rate or hours, the rate, the hours. So like, I know for a fact, if I don't put hours, it's gonna give me an error message. Watch that not actually happen. Why did I not get it?
And you got out.
Because
And you got out.
Because you knew this would happen, so you've already built things to stop it.
Maybe it's a 0. There we go. So that's what happens. But yeah, so you can put in your custom. You could technically, if you wanted to like do a kind of substitute, you could like delete all the front and back of it. So like you could just have it say quantity must be non-zero because this is always the same at the end. This is always
Can
the
you
same
say
at the
that? What
beginning.
does it say?
It says quantity must be a non-zero because I put in
So
zero.
what you're saying, it always says it at the end. So everything
Oh
you
yeah,
make.
so you can look up exception code values in SOAP API developer guide, you could like do a remove of that error or part of your error.
Okay.
So like,
Okay, no, I'm just trying, I can't see it that well, and I think I've seen it on a ton of flow errors for a client.
yeah,
That's
so
why I'm
like,
just saying, I think yeah, it's the same one, yeah.
yeah,
I just
so
didn't
like,
see it.
because this is kind of like generic every time,
Yeah.
like this isn't really what like your end user would care to see.
Yeah,
So
they
you could
just want to see the
technically like
feel.
kind of delete this part out of it if you want to do like a substitute type thing where you say like remove this with blank and then that like removes that to clean up your error message. I've never spent the time to do that, but I've thought about
Spent time to put why we can't have nice things.
it. Yeah.
It was a much more important message.
But yeah, so that's like just an example of
Mhm.
like
Have to.
what you can kind of do, how the error messages can be put in play so that when I see that error message, what do I do as a salesperson? I realize, oh, I should go add a quantity, and then I can go back and update it again with the quantity.
Yeah.
So by doing that, you're giving them a chance to fix it without them having to come see you. So hopefully they can self-correct their mistake. Did I get out of Zoom?
You paused it,
Okay,
I think.
there we go. All right, so I think that kind of, I can talk way more about flows. There's a lot we didn't touch on, but hopefully that gives you all like a kind of idea of where you can start.
Mhm.
And once you get used to that, then the rest of it just starts falling in line because you'll start realizing all the scenarios that you can put flow into. So it gets really cool, and you can start referencing lots of different things and making things happen behind the scenes that you're like, oh, that was sweet. Like, what was it we were talking about, like the campaigns for you? So like,
I always ask him, I'm like, can you do this? I'm like, I know it can. He's like, yeah, we can do that.
So,
Oh, that's so nice.
so like Lane was saying like, hey, based off of like when we create like a new contact, we want them to like automatically be in a campaign. So we would set up a process builder. Technically, we probably could do it in a process builder, both campaign. If for whatever reason it gets like triggered again, you can only have one campaign member
Right.
per contact of a campaign. So if you accidentally had it like somehow triggered twice, then it would error. So if you put in a flow, you could like check to see if it exists before going and creating a new one, like we did with the entitlement.
To say that one just got built for us, that error was a panic for all. I was like, shoot, we're gonna error everywhere? Okay,
No, it's just if it's a duplicate.
right, no, he built the flow to look it up to make sure.
Okay, yeah. So
For a second,
that,
I was like, oh my gosh.
no, that is why you use the flow.
Still need to build that flow.
We can do that right now.
Do it. That'd be great, because I couldn't figure out how to do it on
I
mine.
just remember, I mean, you can get it started. It's whenever a new contact comes in, I wanted certain values set and automatically added to a campaign.
Or when certain values were picked, putting in the new contact, that would determine the campaign limit.
I mean, we probably just put it in a general campaign, although if they have given a donation, then I want them to go to the donor campaign.
But a contact can be in multiple campaigns.
Yes, I'm just saying, it's based on like having the criteria. Well, I guess I did want that. I wanted, it's either go to general donor, and then like I needed to just populate like status and there are a couple fields. Or I need to make them required in my new contact flow.
When you say that, you mean the fields on the contact or the fields on the campaign?
Contact.
Okay, yeah.
Because I imported from Access and they have this really complicated way of pulling their address list. The status has to equal this, and type has to equal this, and campaign has to equal this, and this. And so anytime you add a new contact, if you miss any one of those things, they won't get added to the mailing list.
In Access.
Well, now in
Oh,
Salesforce.
okay.
Because I brought it all over and I'm trying to keep the mailing list that we had
True.
currently. I'm eventually going to get my data cleaner, but I'm working on it.
I guess I'm on 4G right now. Let me see if I can get on Wi-Fi. Doesn't want to,
It's not letting you on?
oh, there it is. I need the verification code, super protected. to get in? Like the two-factor, does that ever happen for you? Oh, I get two-factored.
I don't know that, on what, your,
Like it
Your-
says
your-
like,
on your phone, or
It's
usually
usually
it was my email, so I get sent to my email. Look at all my test donations. I was playing around here earlier today, $10. High roller,
Is that mine? You were playing?
yeah. All right,
You're working overseas.
no, I was doing the recurring donation. Okay,
Are you a
so,
nonprofit org? No, you do both, or you only do nonprofit?
I only work with nonprofits, yeah.
what is this?
So when we've dealt with, like, we dealt with cases and assets and all that sort of fun stuff that is also available with NPSP, and we were doing nothing with donations, we were using QuickBooks for our donations.
So
And
here's,
then- okay.
oh, sorry.
Oh, hold on.
And then we were using campaigns for events, mailings, and keeping those campaigns also for GAUs, where you could sit there and say, okay, they bought a table, but every plate costs this. So that's not a donation of the ticket that they bought. But this money above that is what, so we had GAUs splitting that up too. And then I just need to know that to run a report to send it to our QuickBooks person, so then she could say, okay, this is how much per plate was, and we'll break that out.
Yeah, I've only done stuff mostly on the donations.
All right, so what are we doing here? We're starting from a contact.
Well, I don't know.
Oh, I think we're out of time.
But,
So-
because, and she had a question, I don't know that was answered. How do you know when it's process builder or when it's flow?
Like, how do you, just like on,
Is there
okay,
like a general
the
rule?
best. Well, and like you were just saying in the beginning, it was like, well, as things evolve at Salesforce, they're, making this gonna be the go-to rather than this. So do you see Flow and Process Builder working together? Or do you just see where it's gonna be
Flow is,
an
gonna
action
be-
kicking off a flow and you don't need a Process Builder to kick off a flow?
Flow is going to be more and more to long term, based off of what I'm seeing. Process Builder will be around and will probably stay around for a long time. But I think once they make Flow a little bit, I think Process Builder will be around just because it's like Flow on training wheels.
Mm-hmm.
But then Flow will be getting a lot more focus by people. Workflow rules are good primarily for time-based as well as email alerts. Those are the two times I typically use workflow rules.
Mm-hmm.
Because a workflow rule has better error handling with those kind of things. So like if you want to wait for 5 hours, or maybe like you have an opportunity that closes or donation that closes, you want to create a renewal type thing in a year. But you want to wait a year till after it closes before you create it or something. Process Builder doesn't do a good job with that. It can do it, but if you like deactivate a user or something, then it will like error out. Because it'll be like, oh, a running user that's deactivated, try to create an opportunity and it won't work.
Yeah, like right now I'm dealing with unable to lock row, unable to, like, what the heck's my whole string there? It's a mail merge fail, and everything I've looked up, they're like, you've either got an apex or a trigger or something. I'm just like, how do you find that?
Yeah, you probably got
It's not giving me the nice little message with the little bit in the middle going, this is what you're missing. This is where it is.
the unable to lock row just means that you've got more than one update taking place at the same time. So typically that's going to happen when like you've got a delayed action of some sort.
Yeah, I've been trying to turn off like the contact declarative lookups. I'm just like,
Those would normally be immediate,
okay.
but
Yeah, and they have like I don't know,
I would think you've got some Apex.
35,000 different like triggers and apexes in their org. I'm just like,
It's
oh.
probably Apex causing that, because there's something that's waiting till like right after the record's updated to do something, and then there's probably like multiple things that's triggering.
Yeah, and it's weird because something went updated on last Monday at like 1 a.m. something from another thing that another consulting developer built for them. Because I can see there the last, that says, like this developer was the last one to update at 1 something in the morning. And I'm like, okay, and then she tried to merge this person on Tuesday, and she's been trying since previous Tuesday, every day, multiple times a day, trying to merge these 2 people into one. But it's not happening with everybody else. She's been totally merging away with everybody else. It's just 1 person. That's why I'm like, such a weird anomaly. You're not getting it with all your merges. I know.
I'm not sure.
It's an anomaly. I'll be honest. I sat there and said, this is from this other developer. I'm gonna push it back and say, ask that developer what kicks off at 1 a.m. I mean, I went and looked at their Apex code and sat there and went, okay, so far I've found 12 things that kick off it. And I haven't gone through it all yet.
So if you search for Apex jobs and your setup, that will show you all the things that are queued up.
I think I looked there for some reason. This is the bad thing about working on multiple tickets, multiple orgs. You start going, I can't remember. Like someone will be like, hey, did you? And I'm like, which one was that? I'm like, oh yeah, I got this done yesterday.
So yeah, like the Apex class is here, who created it, what happened. It's not necessarily the best way to like read it, but
I think I went there and I was like, it comes down to like, okay, well, how many hours are we going to take to search for this without saying, okay, the person who built this, we need to ask them really quick.
yeah.
They'll probably be like, oh, this is what's causing it. Our bad. Yeah.
But yeah, I prefer, you kind of like slowly move up, but I think generally you always start a process builder nowadays. And then if you need to go back to workflow rule for like an email alert, or you're just hitting too many limits with process builder, then that's an option. But if you got a lot, like I try to move things into flow.
Since I don't know process builder, can I just start with flow?
Because most of like the
well, that's
builders,
why I was making the point that you were saying that's kind of the realm that Salesforce is going. So start with
like
what their future is, rather
right.
than go, okay, what have they been doing in the past, and what, because that's what I've found even from 2016. There's things that they've just, I mean, Tim was the one that was like, oh, don't even go on to Lightning. Get your trial in Classic, stay on Classic. Lightning sucks. 8 months later, he's like, oh my God, Lightning's amazing. Everybody needs to be on Lightning. And I just looked at him, I was like, you told me specifically to my face not to do that. And he goes, yeah, I was wrong. I mean, they've done a lot more testing now. They've done all this. They did it a lot better. And I was just like, but that's where it could, like 8 months can make a change.
Yeah.
And now, like 2020, there's going to be things that just, everybody's going to Lightning, and you're going to have to be prepared to be like, okay, who in my org will freak out if they see Lightning when they open up their. It's like,
It is a nice thing. My people have never seen that.
Exactly, same.
yeah,
I mean, my one org has, the other one.
I worry about my old organization.
So here's an example of a process builder.
Okay.
That was the one that was doing all that logic that we saw. So like this little icon's the flow. So you'll see like this process builder scenario triggers the flow. The next one triggers the flow. The next one triggers the flow. The next one triggers the flow. This one does a record update, just an edit of records. This one does a flow. These next two do little record updates. So the majority of like the process builder is just triggering flows to do all the work, because you can be a lot more exact with flows and it's more efficient.
Could that whole thing be in a flow?
It would be a more complex flow. Yeah.
So this is a nice way to organize a bunch of flows.
Yeah.
Structure.
You could have one thing, just like every time it gets edited, you go through a flow and then you do all the things this is doing. But this is just a little bit easier at this point to deal with.
But what about on creation, right? Because a process builder, it's a record created or edited can initiate a flow. So like I have a flow that runs only when created.
So you would just have a process builder where you would do
Yes.
this.
Until we have that, but how could I move that to just a flow?
You would have to have the process builder still.
Okay, so that. I
Yeah, the
can
flow,
do.
you cannot like say this only runs in this
Okay.
creation.
Okay,
You just have to make sure you only trigger it when it's created.
yes. Because we edit these records all the time and we don't want,
But you could also have that in like one same process builder. So like if I create a new version here,
So you can't have it as an action because it's a creation.
correct.
What about the subflow?
But if you do an is new, then that only runs then when the record's created. So that way, you know, like it only will go down this when it's a new record.
Okay.
Subflow is good if you've got something. I got an example.
Of course you do.
Uh,
He's the flow master.
Here's one I built with Lane last week or 2 weeks ago or something. So we have a screen here where you select multiple campaigns and it's a record choice, it's a record choice variable. So it just lists all the campaigns, but what's actually selected on the back end when you select like 1 or 3 or 5 is the campaign ID.
Mhm.
And then it sends that to you in a string.
Mhm.
So that string is a semicolon, just lots of campaign values. And then we use this subflow, which I built and it's on my website that you can just like install in. And you pass in here my selected campaigns as an input variable. And then this is where we get with the output variable. I put all those into that collection variable that I kind of briefly talked about. So instead of like, instead of it being like this, it comes in more so like this.
Records.
And then I can loop through. So I like send this one in and then we do things. And then after we do that, we go here and like just, you can loop through each of them. So what's happening is now I've got all those and I say with that grouping of campaign IDs, that's my collection.
Mhm.
I want to go and I created just a text variable called looped campaign ID. So now I know the campaign ID, each time we loop through, we go through one record at a time. So it's like an Excel spreadsheet. We're just on like row 1 and then we'll be on row 2 and however many more. So for each item in there, we set all the fields that we want for campaign membership. So we've got loop campaign ID, record ID, set the status to sent.
So you would use this anytime you are grabbing multiple, like a multi-pick list.
Mhm.
multiple times.
So
And
you're.
we add that to the collection and then we create all the memberships at once.
So what I'm seeing there is the subflow. So from the screen to the subflow, the screen is saying, these are all the options for campaigns. And then 3 have been picked and that goes into the subflow.
Mhm.
And the subflow is the one that's putting semicolons into the 3 that were picked.
Yeah, so I'm going to error this out because I don't have a contact. And we can see what happened here. But like, you'll see my subflow, all the screens, it says like subflow, parse IDs. And then it does all the things. So we've got our value here, and then we're grabbing and adding to a collection these into my multi-select value. And then eventually we output it here. So this is now our outputted multi-select, which goes into our main flow. So like all that happened, but you'll see like we don't have too many elements here. There's a lot of elements in this subflow. So we're able to like reuse this across multiple things. So if you got a lot of complexity that's reusable, or just you need it to like make something a little bit less crazy, you can use the subflow. But that's like a little bit more advanced and it's good to do, but don't like worry too much about trying to like do the best flows initially. Just like once you have an idea.
So when you
Try to
click on that
knock
subflow, you click on that,
Oh yeah,
like it just opens up something very simple.
because I put just the input and just the output that I need, and everything else is happening in that subflow. So like
Where is the actual what you're supposed to do in the subflow defined?
The subflow
Okay, it's named somewhere else and you grabbed it. Okay.
is an actual flow. It's this parse multi-select.
Got
So
it.
this is what that is.
I knew I was right. Oh.
So this is all the things that was happening. And then once it runs through this, it exits and goes, passes the output and then finishes the rest of that other flow I was in.
Slick.
But that's like more advanced. Like I would just be
So there
focused on
was-
like trying to do things and get it to work and then
So there
figure
was
it
this
out.
flow that I looked at and it was crazy looking, not as crazy as the one that you had, which I can't even imagine what your side, like when you run that flow that happens. Like it's gotta be a novel. But, they were trying to add people into an office, take people out of an office and update all these things.
Mhm.
But the problem is when they were saying, put people in, take people out, everybody was being taken out. And then the person who was actually, it was a community, this person was in the actual community, got kicked out. Because what they did is just say, okay, remove everybody and then just add in the new officers. And the person in the thing doing the actual, like, adding in the officers, as soon as they went to the next part of that flow or hit whatever button,
So they did not-
they got kicked out. They're like, I can't update.
So they didn't filter on the delete. Like they just deleted everything and then forgot to like add. So yeah, gotta.
And then, of course, the flow is so convoluted now that it's like, oh my gosh, to redo all of this it's now a project. It's not just a management. That's a project.
Yeah.
What, can you really, hopefully maybe fast, explain the limit piece?
So inside of flow, there's a few key limits. The first is you cannot have more than 2,000 elements. So when you're looping or something, you can't go inside of one transaction, which would be like, I hit a button and things happen.
Right.
If I had another screen, I hit a button, things happen on the screen, all of that would be one transaction.
Okay.
You can only go through 2,000 of those elements in one transaction. So as long as you're not working with like over 900 records, you're pretty much good.
No, we were working with 284 and we were creating a campaign record from a campaign record, so it was pulling 284 onto the new record and I got a limit error.
So you could be triggering too many queries. And
Well, yes, that's what the,
were you creating them in a all at once or with like a mass create?
I would assume that's what he, so I have like 4 fields that I input on this one record in a screen component. And I just hit next and it creates it. And then it brings over all 284 campaigns onto that new one, or campaign numbers.
So ideally, that shouldn't have a problem.
Okay.
I would check to make sure you're creating all 260 at once as opposed to one at a time. Because if you're not doing a collection, then it's like doing one at a time or it's like a data load. So you want to do like the data load of just pushing them all in like a group.
Okay.
If you're doing that and you're still hitting an error, then I would recommend putting inside of your loop, like you can count how many you're going through. And once you hit like 50, stop and have it say hit next, then you hit next and it goes through another 50 and then it stops and you just keep hitting next like 5 times until you're done.
Okay. He fixed it. I just didn't understand why. He didn't have a chance to tell me. He just said it was fixed.
But yeah, so the limits, those are kind of the 2 main ones. Is just if you're trying to do too much in one transaction of like somebody clicking the button, you might need to break it up a little bit. And that's like kind of the main thing.
Okay.
It's high data volume. Like if you're doing like hundreds and hundreds of records, that's normally when you're gonna hit things. And then you gotta get creative or use code.
Okay.
wait, sorry, so is flow better with high numbers? Or process builder?
They're actually the same thing.
Okay.
Flow and process builder is a different skin of flow. But anytime you're using, like, if you want to do things in the thousands, that's when code is normally your best option.
Yeah.
Depending on how like quick you need to update things and all that.
And that's why you're gonna learn flow, that process builder, because it's just a skin.
Yeah, I'm not.
My-
I'm
you're
not.
But
I mean, when I.
Except for the one caveat of creating new
I get the
brands.
logic. I mean,
they've got
Me
like,
too.
when I was talking to the PM, they said that the flow
Hi, Aaron.
engine.
Yeah, really.
I think we're signing off, Aaron.
Hi. All right. Bye, guys. It was nice. Nice to meet you.
The flow engine's only like 50% optimized, they said, because it's like mostly happening outside of